Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review. I'm here today to talk to you about Marvel television shows that were not part of the Disney Plus MCU shows. You know, love them or hate them, you gotta give it up. The Marvel television shows, they had style to them. They had maturity to them. They were solid and they did not rely on Disney baby humor. You know, as I'm making my Runaways videos now, there's something I realized when I was thinking about like making these videos, and that is I'm just not a fan of the MCU Disney Plus shows. I've talked about them before. I've talked about my like of some and my disapproval of others. But for the most part, the only one I can truly 100% say that I actually love is WandaVision. When it comes to that Falcon Winter Soldier and Hawkeye, I just like them, but barely. I really wanted to. And then when it comes to, let me get down to the rest. And when it comes to that of Miss Marvel and She-Hulk, I just wasn't feeling them. Now, as for Loki, I've never seen Loki. Oh, and also, I don't like What If. And so, like, when it comes to those shows, like, I realize something. There is a formula to the Disney Plus Marvel shows. They're really short, like very, very short, like mostly 6 episodes at most. Sometimes they can get a little higher. The first episode will start off pretty interesting or pretty solid, but then after that, it goes into major filler where nothing matters. And then once it gets towards those last 2 episodes, that's when things start getting picked up again. Oh, Moon Knight. I forgot about that. I'm still pissed about Moon Knight. But anyway, but once you get to those last 2 episodes, things start to like pick up more, but sometimes they don't pick up enough. And that's my problem with the Marvel MCU shows. There's no real substance to them. They're basically 6 episodes, like a 6 episode trailer for whatever the next installment of the movie's supposed to be. And that's really all it is. WandaVision led into the multiverse of madness with Doctor Strange. Moon Knight, I'm still not sure what the connection is. They're supposed to have a connection with Blade and I think Black Knight, but they haven't really established that very strongly. Let's see. She-Hulk is supposed to, of course, tie more into the Hulk, into the Avengers. Miss Marvel ties into Captain Marvel. Hawkeye is supposed to, I don't know what Hawkeye is supposed to tie into. Is Clint like truly retired? Is Kate really taking up the mantle? If so, then she could be joining probably the Avengers or maybe a version of like, the young Avengers. Ironheart's supposed to have a show. She was just in Wakanda Forever show. I mean movie. And she's supposed to tie in bigger to like the movies, and that's the problem right then and there. Is like the MCU Disney Plus shows, they only tie in to that of the movies, and they try to construct like an actual format, and they try to construct an actual like plot for the entire like series, but I don't know. I feel like they missed the mark in so many ways because they lose focus because they're trying to focus on other things. Oh, also Loki's supposed to tie into the whole like multiverse thing. And so like because they try to focus on a bigger broad scope, they lose focus on their actual show. Now, I am all for diversity. I love diversity to death. I'm always preaching it on my channel. And that is one good thing about the MCU television shows, is that they're very, very diverse. However, a problem I am now starting to see is that with that diversity, they're losing focus on the actual narrative of the story they're trying to tell, which is supposed to be a comic book superhero like origin type thing. With like a lot of these like newer shows, they're focusing a lot more on race and ethnicity and culture, which is a good thing. But I don't need to see that in every episode, if you see what I'm trying to say. Because if you ever watch my channel, look, don't even get me with that whole toxic crap. You know I ain't for that. I ain't one of these people who scream woke or nothing like that. I can't stand them. But I have started to notice a starting trend in a shift in the MCU shows. It started all with Miss Marvel. Well, actually, it started a little bit with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I've noticed. With that, they had a lot of black awareness in their show. And I remember when I was watching that, I was all like, okay, well, where is this going? Because I assumed it was going to be a buddy cop show about Sam taking up the mantle of Captain America and, like, you know, Bucky trying to like overcome his demons that he had in the past when he was brainwashed and trying to make amends. And it started off like that in the first episode. But then by every other episode, the influx of like race towards black people in America started taking over the show. And while that is a great message and should be explored, I was surprised that one, it showed up in the MCU, because in the MCU, everybody seems to respect other people's races and stuff. So I was very shocked about that. And then like I was even more shocked because they was telling more of an internal struggle with Sam instead of the outer one of him becoming Captain America. The internal one was, will society accept a black superhero and a black Captain America and stuff, because we know how this country can be at times. And while like that was a great lesson to teach, I didn't understand what it meant for the whole scope of the show from the pilot episode and moving forward in the MCU. Because it's supposed to have a point in the MCU, but if you don't see all this racial stuff happening in the MCU, then it becomes pointless and stuff. And like I remember like with Miss Marvel, they explored very heavily on the Muslim race, something a lot of people don't know in their culture and religion. That was a great teaching lesson. But the show focused primarily on that, and also like Miss Marvel just acting like a teeny bopper teenager and stuff. And so like, and I remember when I was watching that show, I was getting frustrated. I'm just like, she's not even becoming like a superhero. So what is the point? Who is her real villains and stuff? And it was mostly just a cultural experience, which is fine, but that's not okay in a 6 episode 20-minute like thing, you know what I'm saying? Like, you need to explore like other stuff. You can explore race relations, but you need to also add in that superhero element, similar to that of Luke Cage. They had in there they showed what it's like to be a black person. They showed the urban lifestyle from that of a person who is bad for society and one who is good for society. But they also showed that superhero element to it. And that's something the Marvel shows don't do. The MCU Marvel shows, they focus primarily just on one thing. And then like when it came to She-Hulk, even though I didn't watch every episode of that, the ones that I did was very heavily on women empowerment, which is also a great thing, and also her dating life and stuff, and how things are different for her because she is a woman and like things are men. Like when she said, you know, she worries when she go out at night, will she be like assaulted and stuff like that. That is a great lesson to tell. but you have to find a better way to blend it in with her being a superhero. And for the most part, she wasn't even really interested in being a superhero because this happened by mistake. I totally understand that. And but then it's all weird towards like the end. All of a sudden now she wants to be like a superhero, but she didn't want to be a superhero before that. And so what is her superhero real origin and villain and all? And Titanium wasn't even a great villain and stuff. And because they focus so heavily on women empowerment, they lost focus on, like, what that show was supposed to actually be about and stuff. And even in the lawyer stuff, like, yeah, they did courtroom stuff and they did lawyer stuff, but I felt like it was all played for like a parody. Like, they didn't take the lawyer stuff serious. And when it comes to Jennifer Walters, the whole lawyer aspect of her character is supposed to be taken very, very seriously, and they squandered that a bit. And now they're coming out with the Echo series, and the series ain't out yet, but I read the description. And they said they're gonna focus on her Native American roots and identity and stuff like that. And I'm just kind of like, that's great to show in the show. But a lot of people, for one, didn't even ask for an Echo series, because one, she's a villain. And two, how is this supposed to tie in? I guess it's gonna tie into Daredevil somehow. And not only that, but then it's kind of like, is she a hero? Is she an anti-hero? Is she a villain? Like, what's going on? But they seem so far to focus, they said, on her ethnicity and stuff. It's great to show stuff like this and that, like the language, the culture, the cultural aspect of it, but they need to stay focused. And if they can't stay focused, then that's going to be a problem. Then you have like Moon Knight, which they had this whole Egyptian like theme type thing, but and then Moon Knight's supposed to be Jewish, but the actor's not Jewish, but then they say he's like Jewish faith or whatever. And so that whole show, Moon Knight, wasn't even really about a vigilante. It wasn't even really about a hero. It was about a man struggling with mental illness, and not even the real primary man and stuff. And that's great, they want to focus on mental illness, but that's all they focus on. And then they infuse tons of humor and stuff. And so and he was barely Moon Knight in the show, and he barely wore the costume, and he barely fought. And then when his lover took up like a superhero mantle, she did a whole lot more butt kicking than he ever did in the suit. And so they shift the focus, and I was just kind of like, well, what am I supposed to watch? And then they had the whole Egyptian thing, which was cool, learning about like their gods and this and that. But how exactly this going to tie into the MCU? Because tons of gods are coming in, and we barely know the ones we already have. And it was once again a lame villain, because they didn't focus strongly on like who was the primary villain of the show. Like the villain, oh my god, the villains are so weak in the MCU. At least in the other shows, they had great villains and stuff. And with WandaVision, that was good because it was a huge mystery. Plus, it was the first show, so you're invested in the mystery, but it was so much humor and stuff. But then when the mystery, I was like, oh, Wanda really truly is the main villain and stuff like that. And not only is she the main villain, but Agatha really isn't. She's just evil just to be evil. And now Agatha is about to have her own stinking show for reasons unknown. And how in the world is this going to tie into the MCU? And, and why is Echo and Agatha getting their own show? They're villains. Why are we glamorizing villains? Villains are supposed to be bad. And now, like I said, Ironheart's about to have her own show to get us introduced to her so she can take over the mantle of like Iron Man type thing. And and there's gonna be a lot of men who are toxic who are gonna complain, because in case you haven't noticed, the MCU shows are becoming very female centric and stuff. Ironheart, Echo, Agatha. We had WandaVision that focused more on Wanda than it did Vision. Hawkeye, She-Hulk and stuff like, and Miss Marvel. And a lot of people kind of like, well, where the dudes at? And when the dudes are there, they're kind of like, made to look like jerks or like really idiots or like assaulters and stuff like that. And it's kind of like they're kind of repeating, I don't want to say a mistake, 'cause it's not a mistake in the comics. They're repeating, God, that's a good word to say. They're repeating, I can't think of, because it's not a mistake, but they're repeating like I said, a same pattern that didn't please a lot of people in the Marvel comics. Because when they went to the Ultimate Comics, it started focusing a lot more on females and diversity, and it started to exclude a lot of the male heroes that people knew and loved because a lot of them were dead and stuff. And this actually caused comic book sales to tank, like for real, like I'm not even joking. And that's what really happened. They started introducing characters like Miles Morales, Riri Williams, Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan. They turned Miss Marvel into Captain Marvel with Carol Danvers and stuff, and it became very more diverse. But they lost the focus in their comics because when they started telling all those diverse characters, they got rid of the ones that people knew and loved. But sadly, the ones people knew and loved are a lot of male and a lot of white male characters and stuff. And it's nice to have a good blend. It's nice to have a good balance. You know what I'm saying? If you don't have that good balance, then people are gonna like steer clear of it. And now the movies and the television shows in the MCU are doing that. Now let's get to the actual topic at hand. Now that I went through the MCU thing, see, I wanted to show the stark contrast of the MCU versus the Marvel television shows. Now, when it comes to the Marvel television shows that are outside the MCU, but they share same properties, like the events of what happened in like the Avengers movie, Kevin Feige distanced himself from them shows. But when you watch those shows, they came on other networks. They came on ABC, Netflix, FX, Hulu, Fox, and Freeform. And there are a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 non-related MCU shows. The one that lasts the longest was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And when it comes to those shows, like I said before, not all of them are great. Some are just downright terrible and everything, but they had a unique flair to them. They had like a certain theme. They had strong villains. Like, oh my God, they had great villains and stuff. And they had really compelling heroes. And and it's because they focused on the actual characters from the comics and stuff. And when they focus on that, they focus on the mission at hand. What was the primary mission? And what is the the villains doing that is causing so much chaos that the heroes need to band together and take their behind out, They were darker than any of the MCU shows. They did not have Disney baby humor, except for MODOK and everything. That MODOK, I like to think of MODOK as like, as kind of like, trying to capitalize on that MCU stuff, and it really shouldn't. And like, but yeah, it's like these shows were darker. They were more action packed. And they did not rely on humor. And if they did have humor, it was very adult, mature humor, not awkwardness. Like in Thor: Love and Thunder, when somebody's pulling out a device, she's like, "Oh wait, wow, what's this? That's like a really cool like Asgard bomb detonating device." And then next thing she pulls out like earbuds and puts them in her ear, and it's an MP3 player. She's like, "Oh well, see, I thought oh crap, I forgot my line. I'm improvising." And that. Like, I'm so tired of seeing that. I'm so tired of awkwardness in the MCU. These other shows did not have that whatsoever. And if they did have it, it was to a specific one character or maybe two, and it was very mature and everything. Also, episodes lasted for a bit longer than the MCU shows. At the most, they would go from like 10 to like 13 episodes. But I believe Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. went for a lot longer than that. They went to the more traditional, this will pull up faster. They went to the 20 mark and everything. And when they went to the 20 mark, they could tell like more stories. Now, I haven't seen every season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I gave up after the first season. It tried to be a little too MCU with like, the Avengers, and I didn't understand the what they was trying to like accomplish, and I got tired of the extreme virus. But I do remember from what I saw, it was very grounded and very mature. Then in later seasons, people said it kicked up because they started bringing in heroes from the comics like Ghost Rider and everything. And um you had like shows that I did watch, like Agent Carter. Agent Carter was like amazing. It was a period piece, and it did take inspiration from the MCU, like they was all supposed to, but they weren't really allowed to truly 100% tie in. Just like the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Coleman is in that, but he has not shown up in the MCU since he died in Avengers and stuff. And so Agent Carter brought in, of course, Agent Peggy Carter. It was short-lived, 2 seasons. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. lasted for 7, but Agent Carter, my God, like the action was hard hitting. You could feel those punches through the screen. She had female empowerment, but they didn't flood the show with it to where it was only that and that only. Like with She-Hulk and stuff, they had a nice blend, and they showed what it was like back in like the 1950s, 60s, when men treated women like crap, and a woman trying to like survive in that era, and showing that she is the best of the best. And Agent Carter was the best agent they had, but the men did not know that, and then they did not appreciate that until it was too late. The humor in it was very like old school 1950s type humor. It had a mature flair to it. The villains, the villain season one was kind of like Zemo and the Captain America movie, the Civil War one. But he still got the job done, and he still messed a lot of stuff up. Season 2 kind of went downhill for me a little bit. They started showing what it was like being a black man in 1950s, which surprised the crap out of me because, like, they never shown that before, so that was kind of weird. They went that route, and the villain, although powerful, didn't really do it for me. But Agent Carter was a very solid, very decent show that I give high praise to for the writing, the acting, the plot, the structure, everything. I can't say that about the MCU. And then like Daredevil, my God. That is the holy grail of superhero shows. Daredevil is probably the best freaking comic book live action television show ever. They focus on what was important. They focus on the characters from the comics. It was beyond dark. It was beyond gritty. The action was amazing. The acting was amazing. Charlie Cox, my God. Kevin Feige loved him so much, he brought him over to the MCU, and I don't like that version. I don't like the MCU version of Daredevil. I like the Netflix one. Netflix, they was not holding no punches. They was letting you know this is not the MCU, and they was gonna get dark, and they was gonna get gritty with it. Kingpin was an amazing villain that scared the piss out of me and everything. When he beat I think his name is Ben, the reporter dude. Oh my God, that was savage. That was savage. You'll never see that in the MCU. You'll only see that in the more mature type show. And I'm going down the list as like other shows. You got Jessica Jones. Now I particularly did not like Jessica Jones. I love Kristen Ritter, so I was happy to see her in that. But I was a little disappointed she didn't wear a costume. She was really mean and rude, but she held her own. They showed female empowerment, and they showed it for 3 seasons, and where they didn't do it in like a forced kind of way. She was a hard-nosed woman who did not take crap from nobody, and it's because of her tragic past when she was sexually assaulted by the villain and everything. Some people say that's one of the best villains in Marvel history and stuff. The Purple Man, like, he was a sadistic, nasty person who played on her mind and stuff. But for the most part, like, I wish it had more of a superhero flair, but they took it in a more of a realistic route with that show, and people loved it. It lasted for 3 seasons. Then you have Luke Cage, which had its own flair of being this urban, like, superhero show about a man who was experimented on, who for the most part just want to be left alone, but is trying to help his people out in his neighborhood and stuff from all the gang leaders and stuff that are trying to ruin everything. I never finished that season, only because I hate hearing the N word and I just could not take it no more, so I stopped. But a lot of people said from what they saw in the first season was phenomenal. They said it fell in like the second season. From what I saw from the couple of episodes in the first season, it was solid. It reminded me of New York Undercover, a great Fox crime cop show. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Slingshot. I've never heard of that. I've never seen that. I can't talk about it. Legion, that came on FX. You can watch it now on Hulu. It's part of the Marvel franchise. I did not like that show. I couldn't get past a couple of episodes in the first season. I felt like I was like stoned out of my mind watching that show, and I didn't know what the world was going on. And so I just did not care for it. But other people did. A lot of people loved that show. It lasted for 3 seasons. It had a more mature psychological feel to it, I remember. But it also dealt with mental illness, and it did it in a better way than Moon Knight ever did. Okay, let's get to a little disappointment here. Iron Fist. I particularly did not care for Iron Fist. It lasted for 2 seasons. I think the first season sucked. The second season was a bit better. But it did have its own unique flair and style and look to it, unlike that of the MCU shows. They did have Asian influence, but it wasn't the sole focus of the show. That's one thing that the MCU does a lot. When they go to other cultures and talk about them, it becomes an influx and like the floodgates of it, and then they lose focus on like the storytelling. It's great to have culture, but you gotta have a nice blend. The Defenders was a miniseries on Netflix. A lot of people don't like The Defenders. I actually do. It was supposed to be an Avenger on like small screen type thing. I like the characters. We all knew them from the shows we saw. Daredevil was, of course, the best, but it did take too freaking long for the team to come together. And when they did come together, just like everybody else, they always bicker and argue and all this other crap. But when they came together, everything started to come together a lot better. The villains sucked. The villains was just terrible. But the action was hardcore once the team got together and they started fighting. It was really more like Daredevil 3.2, but that's all right because people love Daredevil. And then it was more like Daredevil 2.2 from the season 2, because it followed from what happened in season 2 of Daredevil. And so I was okay with that, and it tied into that of season 3 of Daredevil. Inhumans, yuck. Yuck. Inhumans just crashed and bombed. They just crashed and bombed. I got nothing to say about that. I couldn't even get past like first probably 2 episodes. It crashed and burned. The Gifted, which was part of the X-Men franchise, I have a love-hate relationship with that. It lasted for 2 seasons. It was not particularly all that great. It's an X-Men show that talks about the X-Men a lot, but there are no X-Men whatsoever in the show. It's just a bunch of mutants, and most of the mutants that are in there are created for the show, but there are some from the actual comics. They did bring in one female mutant from one of the X-Men movies, but it's like a different version, and it's just like, I don't know, like they took a more realistic stance on it. The CGI didn't have much because it was on Fox, so they didn't have that much of a budget. If they would have had a bigger budget, I think it would have been better. If they would have had some X-Men that people actually recognize, then people would have like favored it more. The villains, of course, were the humans, and also the inner circle, the Hellfire Club. And so like, and it was pretty tough, you know. And so this rag team of like mutants tried to like stop the humans, the Sentinel Project, and the Hellfire Club, but also while having to deal with their own mutants to fight with and stuff, and they had their own emotional struggle. It was a very mature show and written very maturely. I can appreciate it for that. And the cliffhanger at the end of the second season was cool because they was getting to Days of Future Past, but then it got canceled. I like the mystery of the show, and like, you know, but other than that, like it could have been stronger, but you know, like it just wasn't, you know. The Punisher, one of my all-time favorites. The first season was kind of weird because he stopped being the Punisher in the first episode, and it's like, why? I thought because they built him up great in Daredevil. And so you think you're going to see that big mission he was going to go on and this and that to avenge his family, and it happened off screen. And then he stopped, retired, and I didn't like when he stopped and retired. Halfway into the first season, it picked back up. That show was ballsy, it was dark, it was gritty, it was tough. The lead actor was John, was amazing in that. That dude is the best live action Punisher we've ever had. And the second season, in my opinion, did not disappoint. It was tough, it was hard, it was gritty. Some people didn't like that they portrayed the military as like villains, but it was just a rag team, bunch of group. It's kind of like how it is in the comics, but in the comics it's a little different because he's also a cop. So it's like bad cops, bad military, and just the mob in like the comics, but they just went one way in the show. That kind of angered a couple of people. The acting was flawless. The action was so brutal and mature, something you'll never see in the MCU. The Runaways, which I'm talking about now in my reviews, I'll probably upload it later on before this year is up or next year. I love The Runaways. I think The Runaways is underrated. It lasted for 3 seasons. It had high ratings. It was always in the 80th percentile when it comes to Rotten Tomatoes. The group was cool. They didn't have the bigger budget in the first season to do all this like superheroes fight. The first season was a bit of a drag because it was a slow burn, but with that slow burn, you learned a lot about the characters and the emotions that they go through, so you like that. By the second season, things picked up in a major way. They had a slightly bigger budget. They started bringing in more characters from the comics. They started to be the heroes and the Runaways that people knew from the comics. Season 3 was just awesome. They did a crossover with Cloak and Dagger, which was crazy because Cloak and Dagger was on Freeform, and that was one of the best episodes ever. Speaking of Cloak and Dagger, I wasn't a huge fan of Cloak and Dagger, but I gotta give it up to the story they told and the style in which they told it. It was phenomenal. It was very urban based. It had a different feel to it all around. It did not feel like an MCU show. It did not feel like a Marvel show. It felt like a show. My main problem is that like no costumes. They did give Cloak his costume only for him to like rip it up and just put on a hoodie. They tried to keep it very low key, and because they didn't have that much budget for special effects because it was on Freeform, they didn't give them that Shadow Hunter budget. If they would have had that, oh boy. But you know, when Cloak and Dagger finally truly came together, it took them a good while to come together. and stuff. And when they did come together in the first season, it was cool to see. The second season kind of fell a bit. I think they was trying a little too hard to have their own style and flair. A lot of things didn't make sense. Mayhem didn't make sense to me in the second season. And it just started to fall and crumble. And so, of course, they only lasted for 2 seasons. And the main problem with that is that by that time Disney had bought all as much Marvel property as they could, especially from Fox. And so a lot of shows, and then Marvel also wanted to have all this stuff on Disney Plus. So a lot of these other shows started seeing cancellations, even if they were perceived very well. Modoc I can't talk about because I've never seen. Hit Monkey I didn't even know was a thing, so I can't really talk about it. As for Hellstrom, that show was so boring. I could not get past episode 1. The only thing I liked about it was the one main actress with the short bob hair who walked into screen. That was a nice walk. That's the only thing I liked about it. It was such a boring show, but at least it had a more darker vibe to it, which is something a lot of them MCU shows don't have. But God, it was boring. But all in all, like I said before, I think that love or hate, failure or success, the Marvel television shows are a million times better than anything Disney Plus has put out on like the MCU, because they're trying to please everybody in the MCU. You can't please everybody, and they're bringing in too much baby humor because they need it for the little kids. And that's the great thing about those other Marvel shows. They were willing to go hardcore and go all the way in. Alrighty, well, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.